For 2 centuries, it was a bustling highway into the heart of Canada's West. The Hayes River was the key to the settlement of the prairies and beyond. Countless newcomers arrived in the New World at the river's mouth on the shores of Hudson's Bay. They were greeted by a legendary outpost called York Factory. The Hayes River touches the landscape on a grand scale. It drains over 100,000 square kilometers of Manitoba and connects the center of the province to the sea and the world beyond. The Hayes stretches 400 kilometers across northern Manitoba. The Hayes begins at Molson Lake, near the tip of Lake Winnipeg, then flows northeast across the Canadian Shield, over the clay flats of the Hudson Bay lowlands to reach the sea at York Factory. The native peoples of northern Manitoba were the first to ply these waters. The Hayes currents were more forgiving than those of other rivers. They traveled and traded up and down it for centuries. In 1682, the river would prove to be an irresistible asset for the Hudson Bay Company, and for one of the company's directors, Sir James Hayes, it also offered a measure of immortality. The golden era of the fur trade began. Beaver pelts gathered in the interior were sent down the Hayes to waiting ships in Hudson Bay. Going in the opposite direction were all the European goods headed to Lake Winnipeg and beyond. However, the Hayes doesn't quite reach Lake Winnipeg, so a trip down the Hayes begins on another river, the Nelson, near the northern tip of Lake Winnipeg. This is where Norway House was built, once the inland headquarters of the Hudson Bay Company. The story of the depot dates back to the 1820s, when the Hudson Bay Company dispatched a group of Norwegian men to the site.
However, after the first winter, the road did not progress anywhere. The following summer, they returned to Red River. And this is how Norway House got its name.
Norway House became a beacon in the wilderness, a major way station for fur traders en route from the Red River settlement in the south to York Factory on Hudson Bay. The river tripmen used shallow-bottom crafts called York boats. Specially designed for the river, they were powered by 8 to 10 hardy oarsmen and could carry up to 12 tons of cargo.
I've heard stories from the elders when they talk about their forefathers, and they were trippers and canoe freighters. They would leave home in early summer, and sometimes they would not return till about 4, 5, 6 weeks later. And that's everyday work, like there's non-stop. And when they would arrive home, they would visit their families and be gone again. A lot of times, many of these men got hurt, and some of them lost their lives. Some became very sick and couldn't work anymore. It was an overexertion. So the Hudson's Bay Company did put these men into a lot of stress and a lot of work and a lot of absence from their families.
The strength and fortitude of the York boatmen lives on in the legends of the Cree. Today, the Cree of Norway House honor the stamina and perseverance of their forefathers.
Everybody's got to do the same thing over and over again. They're going to put you all in the water at the same time, and pole same time and breeze same time and focused all together. Well, I was once told that when the York boat did first come in here a long time ago, they could hear them oars knocking, they're pulling hard. Boom, 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 they hear them. That's how strong the men were at that time. I have respect for those guys that did that.
The only way to get from the Nelson River to the Hayes was to row down the Echimamish, a river so narrow that in many places the oars of the York boats would touch both banks. The Echimamish completes the route between Norway House and York Factory, joining the Hayes River just below a small island called Painted Stone. The ancient pictographs on the island were destroyed by the Hudson Bay Company because it believed they were a time-wasting distraction for its Cree employees. It is from Painted Stone Island that the Echimamish gets its name. In the Cree language, Echimamish means river that flows both ways, as it does on either side of the island. While the Hayes is considered a relatively tame river, its upper reaches are broken by stretches of foaming whitewater as it tumbles across the Canadian Shield. The rapids like these at Robinson Falls were major obstacles for the boat trip men. They were forced to make 3-kilometer-long portages through the bush, hauling their 15-meter-long York boat and up to 12 tons of cargo. When British explorer Sir John Franklin encountered the rapids at Robinson Falls in 1819. He wrote in his journal that he would long remember the rude and characteristic wilderness of the scenery, the agitated torrents filled with both beauty and grandeur.
The Hayes River is essentially in the same state as it was when European explorers first came.
Bruno Rosenberg, a river guide, has journeyed down the Hayes a dozen times.
There are spots along the river where you pass by pictographs that could be up to 1,200 years old. And there are places on the river where you might find an old pipe stem, or you might find a piece of old blue china. And when you pass by these places, you can imagine that you're traveling in the footsteps of people who have traveled this river for hundreds or thousands of years. Timber is not cut. Fire still works its way through the ecosystem.
Hell's Gate is one of the canyon sections that dot the upper Hayes, where tight granite corridors cause a sharp increase in the river's speed.
When you come to the Hell's Gate Rapids, you're focusing on reading the water, on watching how it flows. So you're always looking ahead, 20, 30 meters downstream. The last thing you want to do is wrap your canoe on a rock because you're in a wilderness river, and the canoe is your way out, and it could mean your life. The Hayes River is remarkable for the rapids that you pass through. But when you reach the quiet sections of the canyon, you're flowing along underneath 2.5 to 3 billion year old cliffs that have stood there silently and have witnessed who knows what. The water is quiet, it's placid, everything is silent. It's a very inspiring section of the river.
With the roar of the rapids now behind it, the Hayes gradually steps down from the Canadian Shield towards the Hudson Bay lowlands. It is an area known as the Lakes region. The Hayes emerges from the labyrinth of lakes and flows across the lowlands towards Hudson Bay. Along the way, it carves 30-meter cliffs in the hard-packed clay. The Hayes inspires adventure, and for those who answer its call, the rewards are truly unique.
Most idyllic spots in the world. We've probably seen or come very close to 30, 35, 40 bald eagles so far. We've seen 3 osprey, beaver, a black bear, otters. It's just been a wonderful wildlife experience.
There are places where the eagles seem to rise on the river's bank every 50 or 100 meters. We've had them come towards camp after cooking a walleye supper. Always heard wolves howling as we pass, particularly as we pass downstream of New Lake.
Sunshine, wind, fast-flowing river, and beautiful scenery. I wouldn't be anywhere else right now.
The Hayes snakes across the lowlands. It gathers speed and strength as it's joined by the Fox River and the Gods River. Powered by the additional flow, it pours a staggering 1,000 cubic meters of water into Hudson Bay every second. At the mouth of the Hayes and on the edge of the tundra sits York Factory. It stands as a stark monument to a long-vanished era.
The reason that York Factory is here in the first place is on the Hayes River was because this was the major artery into the interior, and for the native groups to come from upriver to trade at the post, this was beautifully situated from a strategic point of view.
It handled all the shipments of supplies bound for inland settlements, while pelts collected throughout the entire Northwest were traded here and readied for transport to Europe.
The local Cree would trade for a gun here for a certain number of beaver, valued in a made beaver standard, as they called it. Then that gun might be traded to an inland group for a larger or greater number of beaver, and then the Cree then would be able to bring those beaver pelts back to the post to trade for other items, kettles, guns again, those types of items.
By the late 19th century, York Factory began fading into history. Economic power and trade were shifting south. Surprisingly, it operated as a trading post until the late 1950s. In 1968, the remaining building was designated a National Historic Site, a memorial to a 200-year-long chapter in Canadian history when the Hayes River was the gateway to Canada's north and west.